I just watched the film The Ninth Gate for the first time a few days ago. It came out in 1999, but I never watched it until just a few days ago for some reason. As I was watching it, I noticed a lot of symbolism that was obviously related to Kabbalah and the Tarot. Certain numbers, words, and phrases also stood out to me. There were some other symbols that seemed to conceal a hidden meaning, but it wasn't at first apparent to me what they pointed to. So I watched it again, this time taking notes, and then I watched it a third time just to see if I might catch anything else that I missed in the first or second viewing. I'm not going to give a complete analysis of the film or fully decode it, but I wanted to share some of my notes. After taking my own notes, I've read some commentary by others, and I found that I wasn't the first person to discover certain connections with the tarot and the Tree of Life, but I've made some discoveries that, at least to my knowledge, no one else has made. At the very least, I haven't found them published anywhere. And I spent a good deal of time looking at different articles that have been published related to the symbolism of the film. So rather than repeat what others have already published, I'm just going to share some of the things I found that I think are interesting. One thing that jumped out at me in the first scene, where Andrew Telfer committed suicide, was the fact that his left shoe came off. I might not have thought twice about the noose placed around his neck if it weren't for the fact that his left shoe was off. Anyone familiar with the Masonic initiation ceremony of the entered apprentice should recognize this imagery. Out of respect, I won't say more about it than that, but anyone who isn't familiar with the initiation ritual can easily find the information if they're willing to do a quick internet search. And it may also be interesting to note that each of the man's slippers had the letter M embroidered on it. His name was Andrew Telfer, though, so obviously his initials weren't MM. Could MM stand for Master Mason? Interestingly, his initials, AT, are the same as the initials of the author of the book, The Nine Gates of the Kingdom of Shadows, which plays a central role in the film. Many of the articles I've looked at that have attempted to analyze the opening scene of the film only scratch the surface as far as I'm concerned. There's much more going on here. I think the opening scene is, among other things, making a coded reference to the divine suicide. I'll offer a little more evidence to support this claim. In addition to the striking fact that Andrew Telfer has the same initials as the author of The Nine Gates of the Kingdom of Shadows, AT, consider the numerical value of his name in gematria. The name Andrew Telfer has a value of 786. It's quite a strange coincidence that the value of the title of the film, The Ninth Gate, also has a value of 786. 786 is also the value of the Tetragrammaton, spelled out as Yod He Vav He, as well as the value of the phrase, the Alpha and Omega. It gets better. 786 is also the value of the phrases, the Garden of Eden, and it is finished. The Ninth Gate is about redemption of the light which has fallen into the kingdom of shadows. It's about raising Lucifer, as stated in the film. And since the film ends with a resurrection, symbolized by Corso passing through the Ninth Gate, it is appropriate that it begins with the crucifixion, or the divine suicide, symbolized by Telfer hanging himself from a light fixture, interestingly enough. And yes, I believe that unquestionably, Corso is Lucifer. Some have mistakenly believed that the green-eyed girl in the film is Lucifer. That is incorrect. She represents what Crowley calls the holy guardian angel. She's also the high priestess, in a sense. The high priestess card in the tarot corresponds to the 13th path on the Tree of Life, which leads across the abyss. It is through the knowledge and conversation of one's holy guardian angel that one is able to cross the abyss, and this is her role in the film. She guides him and protects him as he completes his journey through the Ninth Gate. The fallen angel is restored to his former glory. For anyone who is skeptical, I can offer several proofs that Corso is Lucifer. First of all, the ninth gate is based on the book The Club du Mas. In that book, the name of the protagonist is Lucas Corso, instead of Dean Corso. The name Lucas is clearly related to the name Lucifer. Changing his name to Dean in the movie makes this connection less obvious, but if we look again to gematria, we find that the name Dean Corso is equal to 323, which is the value of the name Lucifer. To avoid any confusion, I'm calculating the value using Jewish gematria in this case instead of English gematria as in the previous instances. But in spite of the fact that I switched systems, I still find this to be an interesting coincidence. That is certainly not my only argument, however. Just looking at the story presented in the film, it's clearly about Corso's journey through the 9 gates and his ultimate passage through the 9th gate. The purpose of the book, which the story centers around, is to raise the devil. This is precisely what happens. When we first meet Corso, he is clearly depicted as a devil. By the end of the film, the devil is raised, in the Masonic sense of the word, to his former status as Lucifer. Significantly, near the end, when Balkan is performing his ritual to summon Lucifer, Corso appears instead and says, "I'm the only apparition you'll see tonight." To the uninitiated, it appears that Balkan's attempt to summon Lucifer was unsuccessful. To those who know, it's clear that he succeeded, and in a sense, he was a burnt offering and a human sacrifice to Lucifer. In a sense, Balkan represented Corso's lower carnal self. He represents the egoic self, which must be sacrificed to the higher spiritual self, represented by Corso. It is with the death of Balkan that Corso enters into the sacred marriage, represented by his ecstatic sexual union with the green-eyed girl outside the burning castle. This is a scene that also reinforces his identity with the beast, pictured on the 9th engraving, in which the woman rides the beast. He is the beast. This engraving is an obvious reference to the whore of Babylon in Revelation who rides the beast. Perhaps even more importantly, it relates to the Lust card in the Crowley Tarot deck, the Book of Thoth. This card is the 11th card in the major arcana in Crowley's ordering of the trumps. The fact that the card is given the number 11, along with the image depicted on the card, associate this card with the 11th Sephirah on the Tree of Life. This 11th Sephirah is often called the Hidden Sephirah. Its name is Dath, which means gnosis. And guess what the value of the phrase Hidden Sephirah is in English gematria? Yes, that's right, 323, the value of the name Dean Corso and Lucifer. If, instead of calculating the value of his full name, we simply calculate the value of his last name, Corso, as he's often called in the film, we get a value of 420, which is also the value of the name Lilith. Lilith reportedly refused to submit to Adam, and apparently preferred the woman on top position over the missionary position. Interestingly enough, when she has sex with Corso, she is on top. This detail may be a reference to Lilith, as well as to the whore of Babylon who rides the beast. Or are the two the same? When Corso asks her name on the train, she tells him to guess. He says, "I don't know, Green Eyes?" So, Green Eyes is the closest thing to a name she's given in the film. He then asks her if she's a student. Interestingly, the value of the name Green Eyes is the same as the value of the word student. Both equal 618. So if anyone thinks my use of gematria in the analysis of this film is a bit of a stretch, that's a pretty strange coincidence. I'm not sure what else might be signified by this number, but 618 is the value of the phrase white gold, which has obvious connections to the elixir of life, or the alchemical philosopher's stone, or the golden tear from the Eye of Horus. But I'm just free associating here. Of course, the elixir of life, or white powder of gold mixed with water, is said to resemble semen. So was their sexual union symbolic of the chemical wedding? I believe so, and I think I've made my case already. This connection to the Eye of Horus is supported by the fact that the right lens of his glasses was broken during his battle with the albino. Of course, it was the left eye of Horus which was gouged out in his battle with Set, so maybe I'm off base here. Of course, if you look into what the left eye and the right eye of Horus signify, you may find it significant that the right lens was shattered. It does seem to me that his glasses are a major symbol in the film, though, and a major theme in the film is the left-hand path versus the right-hand path. Perhaps the symbolic loss of his right eye has more to do with the famous biblical passage in Matthew, chapter 5, verse 29 through 30, which says, "If your right eye offends thee, pluck it out, and if your right hand offends thee, cut it off." I would think this was a stretch if it weren't for the fact that Baroness Kessler is missing her right hand, but maybe it's still a bit of a stretch. But one other thing I found interesting about Corso's meeting with Kessler is that she told him she saw the devil when she was 15. And interestingly, the devil card in the tarot is card number 15. That coincidence is almost certainly intentional, since the film uses so much symbolism that relates to the tarot. I'm going to throw one more thing out there that may be a bit of a stretch. After Corso symbolically loses his right eye in the fight, and he's back up in the hotel room with green eyes, she marks his forehead with her blood. It looks like basically 3 vertical lines, almost like 111. And you could do some research into the number 111 if you want. It's actually fairly interesting, but that isn't what I had in mind. It made me think of the logo for Monster Energy drink. And I remember reading somewhere that the Monster logo, the M, represents the number 666. It said that the 3 claw marks, which appear to form the English letter M for monster, are actually the Hebrew letter Vav, repeated 3 times, which has a numerical value of 6. So Vav, Vav, Vav is a way of writing 666, 666. It seems like a stretch, but then again, it's the logo for Monster Energy drink, and the number of the beast, the monster. So maybe it's not that much of a stretch. But if you can see a 666 in the Monster logo, then you can just as easily see a 666 in the mark she put on his forehead. And the reason I don't think it's such a huge stretch is that in the book of Revelation, the mark of the beast is received on the forehead, and he is clearly identified with the beast later on when she rides him after he is raised as Lucifer. Also, as I've said, his name, Dean Corso, has a value of 323. 323 is also the value of the name Mobus, which is the name given by Nostradamus for the third Antichrist. So whether or not I'm right about the meaning of the mark on his forehead or not, you have to love all these coincidences, and the film is full of them. I can't possibly go into them all here. I'll give a couple more though. If you're wondering what prompted me to analyze the film through the lens of gematria, it's mainly because of the numbers on the back of the 16-wheeler in one scene. I noticed the numbers 60, 80, and 90 on the back of the truck. Then in a later scene, I noticed the same numbers on the back of another truck. I'll be honest, I'm not sure I know what they mean. I tried matching them to the Hebrew letters that have a value of 60, 80, and 90 respectively to see if that meant anything. And then I looked at the paths on the Tree of Life and the tarot cards that correspond to those Hebrew letters. I'm not sure whether I found anything or not, but 60 is the value of the Hebrew or Phoenician letter Samek. Its meaning has to do with support. 80 is the value of the Hebrew or Phoenician letter Pe. Its meaning has to do with the mouth. And 90 is the value of the letter Tzadi. Its meaning has to do with a fishhook. The tarot correspondences are the Temperance card, the Tower card, and the Moon card. Maybe there's something there, maybe there isn't. But the number 444 was also on the back of the first truck, and I immediately recognized that as the value of the name Lucifer in English gematria. Interestingly enough, it's also the value of the name Jesus and Messiah in English gematria. I find that interesting because, as I've mentioned in another video, the Hebrew word for serpent, as in the serpent in the Garden of Eden, has the same value as the Hebrew word for Messiah. Both equal 358. It's just interesting that these numerical correspondences come up in both Hebrew and English. The number 444 is also interesting because if we multiply 4 by 4 by 4, or 4 cubed, we get 64, which is the number of hexagrams in the I Ching and the number of squares on the chessboard, which also plays prominently in the movie. I talked about this in one chapter of the Luciferian Dialogues titled The Game. I mentioned that there's an inner cube of 8 cubes inside an outer cube of 56 cubes. And 56 is, of course, the number of cards in the minor arcana of the tarot. But since I've talked about that before, I don't want to repeat myself. I did find another connection to the hypercube, though, that I think a lot of people probably missed. Why do you think the letters LCF are used to signify Lucifer in the film? Of course, they're the first letters of each syllable in the name, but why not just write the name Lucifer? Why LCF? I believe the answer is in combinatorial mathematics. LCF notation is used for the representation of cubic graphs that contain a Hamiltonian cycle. All Platonic solids are Hamiltonian. Perhaps even more interestingly, all hypercubes are Hamiltonian. I'm not going to try to go into this topic in any depth here, but you're welcome to research it further for yourself if you're really interested. I encourage you to focus especially on the relationship to the hypercube. And I believe you'll come to see the symbol of the 8-pointed star in a new light when you view it as a two-dimensional geometric representation of a hypercube. As for the number 91, which was also on the truck, 91 is the sum of the numbers from 1 through 13. It may also be interesting to some that the Temple of Chichen Itza is basically a 4-faced pyramid with 91 steps on each face, which obviously add up to a total of 364 steps, one for each day of the year. So the number 91 may be seen as indicating the eye at the top of the pyramid of 91 steps. This is certainly in line with the film's themes of Luciferian illumination. There's a lot more to the film than this, but again, I just wanted to comment on some of the things that I've found that I've not heard anyone else comment on. And there is a lot of other great commentary out there. In addition to the Tree of Life, you could also consider the 9 gates in terms of the 9 circles of hell in Dante's Inferno. But I'm going to leave it at that for now. Again, I haven't made any attempts to offer a complete analysis of the film or fully decode it in this video, but I just wanted to offer a few of my notes on a very fascinating film. Thanks for watching. Peace.